Today, we're talking about the Shakuhachi Flute. Hi everyone, my name is Jeff Starr. This is my channel, Not Bad Films, and today I'm being joined by, Daniel, I gotta ask how to pronounce your name properly. I should have done that up front.
Nyohaku.
No,
Nyohaku.
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 And your last name is pronounced?
Soergel.
Soergel.
Soergel, yeah, German family name, yeah. And the Japanese name is a performance name.
Yes, which
So
is...
I didn't actually choose that name, that my teacher chose that name.
So you are a Shakuhachi Grandmaster, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been performing and teaching for about 35 years or so?
Yes, that's right.
So thank you very much for joining me today. I wanted to expose people to this instrument. I think it's really beautiful. And I was hoping that maybe as a way to start, you could give us a little taste of what the Shakuhachi flute actually sounds like.
You know what? I'm going to start with something a little different.
Okay.
This is there's nothing different about this flute, except that it's very crude. And here's a very beautiful, loud, beautiful antique. But this crude one somebody made, a friend of mine made, and this represents what you might have heard 1,000 years ago.
Okay.
When people made their own instruments. So I'll give that a try.
All right. Does that piece or that little bit you play, does that have a title?
No, I just made something up.
Okay.
I just made something up. Which is surprising that you can get so much drama out of something so simple. A cheap hollow piece of bamboo you might find and cut down a tree and make it yourself. And so that's how this all started. I do canoeing, and I was in an estuary. And it was only recently, and I heard the wind blowing. Now, this is an open end here.
Mm-hmm.
The wind was blowing, and there I am in the boat floating along, and I heard this eerie sound.
Mm.
And I think that's where it started. I think somebody brought this back to the village and became the whatever mysterious spiritual person, because these notes, they grow through solid in these positions. So the modern flute has it hollowed out so that you can get them very long. So, but basically it's a very mysterious sound. You simply, like blowing over the bottle, go across like that and get a sound.
I know you know this, but for the viewers, so I took shakuhachi lessons for about a year, and it was one of the most difficult instruments I ever tried to play. And just that task of trying to get a note or a pleasing tone, I guess, was such a challenge. Can you sort of give us maybe like a little brief history on how old this flute is and sort of what, but and I don't want you can keep it sort of condensed, because I know you have a lot of nice videos on your channel, and I know it's a long history, so encourage people to obviously go to your YouTube channel. But
well, just in a few sentences, what makes it a shakuhachi, here's my real one, my favorite one. Mm-hmm. What makes it a shakuhachi is it's exactly this long, which is a D when you blow it through. That, and the fact that there's 5 holes, 4 on the front and 1 on the back for the thumb. That makes it a shakuhachi by definition. The reason it's a D is because in the Tang Dynasty, the emperor decided that D was the harmonious note of the universe. And this dynasty, which will last forever, will be forever based on the key of D. And this happened to be, so we're talking about 800s, 800s. That happened to be when Japan finished with its warring state and needed culture and music and literature and a written language, everything it needed, sent emissaries. And that's when the shakuhachi came to Japan. So it came from China, and it came this size. And it's been ever staying at this size for chamber music and for 90% of all shakuhachi playing. So but it did have 6 holes in China. So the Japanese over time adjusted it, and the Japanese prefer a more dramatic sound than the Chinese, which prefer elegance and symmetry, and the Japanese love asymmetry and drama. So this evolved into a heavier instrument. So you can see it's really quite solid at the bottom.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at something that's both ancient because of the 5 holes and the pentatonic scale. Here's the scale. And you can play an upper octave just simply by focusing your lips better on the front edge. So what it's turned into is, believe it or not, from these very crude beginnings, which probably only had a lower octave in ancient times, it's turned into something like 2.5 octaves, and it can play very intricate music. And you can play all the half tones, all the semitones, and you can even play microtones, those notes that are between, say, a flat, a normal note and the flat. There's all this territory down in there. Say Ella Fitzgerald would be singing the blue note. That was something new in Western music. But in the East, it's been for 1,000 years. So this instrument allows you to play those semitones that are in the middle by simply lowering ahead. If you look from the side, watch what happens. So the pitch goes down. So it's sort of like a fretless stringed instrument. You really can adjust, and you can bend the tone as you're playing, and you can introduce vibrato. And so this attracted musicians. Now the monks were just playing simple instruments like this for hundreds of years. And it wasn't until the 1700s that the classical composers of Japan, now they played the shamisen, which is a lute, a 3-stringed lute, and it's square and has skin on it. And there's a koto. Next came the koto, which is a harp, sits on the floor, 13-stringed instrument. So that was the music of Japan for hundreds of years. Then somebody added this monastic instrument to it, an instrument that monks used for simply the breathing, a little bit of pitch control, a little bit of focus, it develops a humility in the person. Yeah. The last thing it is a musical instrument, but composers found it exotic, and they started to work this into their classical music, or their prime. It was the golden era in Japan, and it was a time in the 1700s, 1800s, and not a lot of contact with the West. So when you hear Japanese music, it sounds very strange. So this is a very rich tradition. It's sort of like our string quartets in a sense. It's a very rich tradition, but there's only a few instruments involved, and no orchestra developed from the 19th, 20th, 21st century. The Japanese orchestra stayed with just that trio. So there's two things going on that are kind of strange. One is the sound of just breathing through the flute that the monks used, and then the other was this chamber music, which had a monastic sound, and it sounds totally bizarre outside of Japan. So it adds a lot of what is it to this instrument.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions here. Sometimes when I've listened to Japanese chamber music like that, it's as from like Western ears, it seems like the instruments are playing almost different tempos, and they kind of maybe start together, they meander off, and then they come back together, and then they meander off and they come back. Although they're playing together, they have their own interpretation of time until they reach certain set points.
Well, no, the time is strictly kept.
Okay.
And it may sound unusual, because when you think of time in the West, so you think of a clock, and it's divided into hours, minutes, seconds, and they're equal, right? And then we set it up. When we set up music, we set up the speed of this clock, and then there you go. And then we slow the clock down, we speed the clock up, that kind of thing. So throw all that out the window and think of time as water. Think of time as a river. So now this river is wide and shallow and languid, and it's slowing, but it has a power to it. It has a mass to it. But then as the river narrows and the banks get closer, the water gets, it's deeper, and then it rushes. It has a different energy. Then when it gets really deep, then you have the rocks, and it's wild and out of control, but it's the same mass. But at any moment, this river can turn the bend and slow down suddenly. And that's how Japanese chamber music works. You very much follow, which is that the stringed instruments playing, they are keeping the time and we're playing along with them. In fact, the shakuhachi is number 3. Those two are much more important. Another thing that's happening is the music is 2-2. It's not like, okay, it's not like 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. It's right, left, as if you're walking. So when we teach it, we go right, left.
That's right. Yes.
Left.
I remember doing this to kind of tempo.
Right,
Yeah.
and left and right and left and right. So it breaks down like that. But then you slow down, you're walking, you see, and then it speeds up. So there's a lot going on to make it sound just bizarre to the Westerner. Like, for example, there'll be a note, say it was maybe a long held note, and a speed up could happen within the middle of this note. Like if we think of a note, say it was in the West, a 4-beat note. Well, that clock is going 1, 2, 3, 4. But in Japanese music, while you're in the middle of that long note, it could start the next movement and then speed up happens during the process of playing that note. So, how do you even guess that? You really have to feel it. So there's this kind of feeling where you're sensing this and going with it. It's there are times, if there's an intricate part of the music, there are times you have to be very well rehearsed and be able to perfectly play your thing in time at the speed that they are setting. But when these slower sections happen, it's really I find it very difficult to follow the other instruments when they're playing very slowly. So you're a musician, you use the metronome. Metronomes don't go there. Metronomes don't go slow enough. So 1, 2, 1, 2. It just doesn't go there. So and another thing that's happening is on the end of the movement, you would in the West, when you reach the end of the movement, okay, and then you start the next movement. But in Japanese music, the other players might be a half a beat ahead. They come in first, and then you come in. Like the movement doesn't start exactly the same. There's also an effect that's very interesting. When you have children singing, and they're singing, and it's very pleasant because children singing, but they're not all singing together. Some are coming in a little late, right? And some are like, and that is written into Japanese, that kind of off feeling, which is very strange. So right when you think, okay, I'm going to come in now, but you're going to come in, and then all of a sudden they come in ahead of you, or so that's very fascinating. So if you look at the limitation of right, left, we have so many time signatures, and I'm not a Western musician, but I mean, there are really just so many. But within the limitation of this simple structure of walking or running or swimming, all of these other things happen. This different kind of overlapping of parts, syncopation of parts. And then there's another level of singing, which adds to the character. You see, when I play that instrument, it's going to sound rough to people, and they'll say, what's the big idea about shakuhachi? What is this? If I just make my own flute, why don't I get an instrument just as well? But that roughness is part of the sound, and the texture of the bamboo, even the imperfection of bamboo, can be part of the quality of the sound. See, imperfection and perfection, this wasn't an instrument made to be as polished and serene as possible. It was meant to keep that edge. Now, I'll get back to the singing. The singing part in a Japanese trio is set at a pitch in the middle that men have to reach down for. I'm sorry, men have to reach up for it. Women have to sing as low as possible, and men have to sing in their higher range. So men are straining to sing higher, and women are, they're trying to sing low, and they're women sing low and their voice is wavering and it's weak, and men higher and it's this edgy sound to it. So if you combine those two male and female sounds, that's something new for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes against the whole style of Western serious music training, like in opera and serious music is training all of this and the throat and all of that. This is, you have to throw that all out the window as well. So so think of that. Think of the textures. You have that the male voice singing high. You have the female voice singing low. You have this rustic bamboo sound, and then you have the shamisen doesn't have the nice resonance of a guitar. It's almost more of a percussive sound.
Yeah, it's very percussive. Yeah,
and it's slapped. So, but that is the timing. It's like jump, jump, and in fact, when you're playing, it looks like you're a good. I see guitars. When you really get going, the sound of that string slapping on the fret, it's very cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in China, that would never happen. These instruments all came from China. These are Chinese. These are Japanese versions of these, Tang Dynasty instruments, right? Well, those, the flute and the flute was Tang Dynasty, but the others were modern instruments.
Sure.
But think of that slapping. Let's just say a guitarist makes a guitar to let you slap that string easily. So that's what happened with the shamisen. The Japanese evolved it so when they hit it, you get that slapping sound all the time.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So here it's something that is an expressive part of playing on our guitars, but over there it's actually built into the instrument.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. The sounds that come out of it are not what you would expect. Like there's one point where, let's just say this was a fret. They have the string and they slide their hand up it, and you get this scratchy sound as as you slide along. All of this makes a whole lot of interesting character. And what's interesting about the bamboo flute is it sounds like a piece of bamboo.
Yeah,
now,
it really has the wood sound is, I think, so apparent.
Yeah. Now now take a clarinet. So I was a child, I played the clarinet, but it didn't make it into my adulthood. And then, as a young adult, I thought, I want to play something. The clarinet, it sounds so unreal. It's really like from space. It's hard to describe. That's the sound. Is it the human voice? It's something else. But when you look at it and you say that instrument made this sound, and that's wild. But that's not happening with these flutes. They actually sound like bamboo you're playing. So there's no reaching for something that, changing it. It's like getting to the nature, getting to the essence of a piece of bamboo.
Shakuhachi flutes are not inexpensive. They can be very expensive.
Yes.
And are often heirloom items that are passed on for many generations, correct? I mean, can you talk a little bit, why are they so expensive for what to a person might just look like a piece of wood with a few holes in it?
Well, I'll take this one here.
Sure.
At the end, I don't know if this will show. Mm-hmm. See the edge?
Yes.
There's a bone there. There's a piece of ivory, actually. And it's cut and shaped and fit in there. Now this one here doesn't have that, but it's playable. But what happens with this one is your breath can see, the bamboo is soft on the inside and hard on the outside. Now your breath will go there and soften it and then create problems, and this edge won't hold up. So it must be put in there for functional reasons. But being this absorbs water like it does, they paint it. So Japanese urushi varnish is a special varnish. It's a lacquer, and lacquers are unlike paint. They dry with moisture. Paints dry through air, and then lacquers, you put them in the box. So I'm saying that's a very expensive process.
Yeah.
So very long brushes are used to carefully paint the inside. But there's also something else going on, which is these holes are drilled in perfectly the right places. So I tried making some, and what I found is if this node, these are nodes, right?
Yeah.
If this node is here, this hole is here. But if the node is in a different spot, that hole may have to be someplace else. it affects the sound. So anyways, with all this going on, so look at this. There's a note 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 nodes, and that's considered beautiful. And you see the shape here? There's a slight curve to this. There's a steel rod they put in, they steam it and they bend it to create that natural look.
Oh, really?
You know.
Okay.
And it's not even part of the bamboo. This one actually has a sort of a natural curve in it. But so this one it's very subtle.
Sorry, I mean, I would also imagine that as the bamboo is maybe bored out, perhaps, or I don't know how much of that is already there, but that thickness must waver. So even if you put the fingerings in the right spots, it might be out of pitch. Correct?
There's when you make one, you drill a smaller hole in the right spot, and then you widen the hole. You can widen it towards this end, or you can widen it towards that end, or you can adjust it a little bit. But I think the masters, they just look at it and they put an X there and they drill the hole and it's there. But there's another thing going on, which is this is wider at the top, and the bottom, the bell end, is narrower.
Mm.
And it gives you a little bit of this back pressure, and it projects the sound quite nicely. Even though most of the sound is coming here, a wave, like a pressure wave, is occurring through the flute, here and here and along the ways. Depending on what note you're playing, you could get a pressure wave at every third of the way, right? You're playing thirds. You're playing octaves, you're using the ends, the pressure wave over the whole thing. But you see, the bell is supporting that wave here. And there's a note at the top, and that's supporting the wave. That's supporting the wave. So when you play loudly, that wave is resonating the whole flute. So if this was just a pipe, you won't get that quality of a reinforced major note. So in the naturally occurring bamboo, there are pressure waves, like let's say a quarter of the way. This one happens to be a quarter of the way, and this is about a quarter of the way. Here, when there's nothing there, so you'll see there's an interaction of the waves with the position of the notes. This is adjusted so as I said, they hollowed out. These have to be broken through. There are long files that go in there, and then they smooth it out. But that said, you can actually fine-tune the sound by adding plaster on the inside surfaces. So there's a special glue and dust, bamboo dust. They add it and they carefully shape it. So they file, they add. See, we're talking about the bore, right? The inside. Yeah. Then there's the outside surface, right? You would think that they're concentric. So like maybe the thickness changes, but the center line but no, the bore actually goes towards the rear hole, and then it backs out this way again.
Oh, wow.
So the bore is not concentric. And they just found that that's what gives you this great sound.
Yeah.
So now when you get back to the natural one, well, that means that this is actually a pretty simple instrument. It sounds amazingly good because the bamboo is a beautiful sound without all this fancy craftsmanship.
Sure.
So what you're talking about in these heirloom flutes, which this would be one of them, is a maker who knows how to get every note to have a certain tone quality. So like with a flute, you find the wood and you make it. That's what you got, and you make another one, and maybe there are some good ones in there, right? But you can take a beautiful piece of bamboo with those nodes in the right spot and a beautiful bell end here, and then you can go ahead and make your masterpiece, because already you've got, you might even have some, like in this case, there's some beautiful decorative pieces on there. Sort of like looking at a rustic tea ceremony teapot. It looks like it's lumpy. It looks like there's something wrong. It's not, though. That's the texture of the beauty, the rustic texture of that clay. And these have that in spades. See, this one's got all kinds of things happening. Yeah. It's actually got the shadow of my fingers having played it for many years. But when I got it, it had somebody else's shadow of playing it very. So it's like as if you had Stradivarius, and the oils of the skin, are penetrating into this, or a guitar. It's been played by some master for all these years, and that is creating a lot of character to it. But it's getting older and it's getting fragile, and these are bound up. This one is
those little bands along the top there. That's to keep it from cracking further,
from
or
cracking
something?
more. Yeah. That's right. So it's something that's not pretty in the Western sense. It has a character, what they call Wabi Sabi, which is familiar. It fits like an old garment. It's comfortable. An antique table, the edges aren't sharp anymore because it's 300 years old, and so many people have used this object. Or old carpenter's tools, burnished. And that's that quality. And these flutes embody that. They really embody it. So this was a new one. It was made for my friend. And then I came into possession years ago, made 30 years ago. And then this one here is 100 years old, and this one probably a little older. Wow. So they love that quality of personality, but there's also a little sadness in it. Like, these flutes are falling apart. Look how many bindings I have on them, right? Now, if I take out this poor guy here, he's got no personality, no visual personality, right? It's brand new. But if this is played for 50 years, it's going to turn a honey brown. And it's going to have shadows of the fingers of the people that play it. And you got the oils, the skin of the people that held it. And that's what keeps these flutes alive, is by playing them and using them. See, there's no varnish on the outside. So it kind of becomes like any musical instrument becomes an extension of yourself. So this really becomes an extension of the body and the mind of the player. And there's something else you might know from violins or even guitars, acoustic guitars. A very well-made instrument played for many, many years by somebody who can really play it. The resonance in the wood is vibrating. In the summer when the wood is moist, and it changes this wood on a molecular structure. I just remember reading, like when I was a teenager, something in Scientific American about the structure, the molecular structure change that happens to musical instruments. So if I play, say, this, well, I'll take this one. If I play this one loudly, I'm actually really vibrating this down to the molecular level. But if I'm playing it softly, maybe not. Or a beginner is playing it, maybe they're not really ringing that instrument. But an instrument that's really ringing and really played actually physically changes. So there's this something happening at the physical level, and in this, spirit level, the character, that adds a lot. So when you have one of these, it's very valuable. So you'll say so-and-so master played this instrument in the 20s or whatever. That becomes really valuable. But what you were saying about heirlooms is quite interesting, because so many people played the shakuhachi, but they didn't have the money to buy a fancy instrument. So they played it. So there's been many younger Japanese people that inherited grandpa's shakuhachi, and they found it in the attic. And then they take lessons, and the teacher says, "Oh no, you can't use this for lessons. It's, the hole is in the wrong spot, or there's something really wrong with it. It's a problem, but you can keep it for its personality, and you can." And then also a beginner doesn't need to have the range of a professional instrument. I mean, this is the same. Like, you can have a superior piano, but who can really get that out of it? You really have to have a player that can get that out. And it's the same thing here. The only thing is that this looks like something you just made and threw together. So when people see it, so if I play the shakuhachi, people, "Oh, that's very nice," and but they don't realize it's very hard to play it well. And the instrument has to be very carefully made to play very demanding music, because music in the 18th century, like I was talking about the chamber, I mean, it's contemporary with Bach. And, that music moves along really fast. And now you're doing that with 5 holes, but there are 12 tones. So you're playing 12 tones with 5 holes, rapid music.
Yeah.
So we have situations where the composers can write pieces that they can't even play, but there are virtuosos that can play them. Then it gets almost a little competitive, and it can turn into showiness. So what we try to remember is, like, wait a minute, the monks, they're playing long tones, and flutes that aren't very good. It's a way of achieving a higher state of mind through deep breathing and emptying your mind in a way that's much easier than just sitting on a pillow.
Yeah.
So sitting on a pillow, they call that zazen. And I'm actually doing that right now, sitting on a pillow. So, but to play a flute is blowing Zen. So it's sitting Zen and blowing Zen, and it's easier for most of us to be just like the people who do meditation. They count their breaths, and maybe they become more advanced, and then they don't count their breaths, and they just breathe. And but if you were playing a flute and you're trying to you're trying to reach for a beautiful tone, just close all the holes and play. You're reaching for a beautiful sound, and you're calming your body, and there's a naturalness. There's a naturalness to it. So Zen is based on Taoism. The Tao Te Ching is the book, and Zen is kind of almost a stripped down version of Buddhism. Buddhism is there, but it's stripped down to essentials, and it's looking back to Taoism, which is talking about the naturalness of the breath, and there are different kinds of breath, but the Tao talks about, can you have the soft breath of a child or a baby. The baby breathes so naturally and beautifully. Well, that's something very different from this wild sound that can fill an auditorium. But this is in the root of shakuhachi playing, this idea of total control of your breath. So if you have very good control of your breath and a very crude instrument, and you blow, as the sound decays, it will break away naturally. And that's very hard to do. It's very, as musicians know, it's the slow pieces that are the most difficult ones. The very emotional and very slow pieces are most difficult. And also, as soon as you're self-conscious, that affects your breathing.
Yeah.
And your tone quality. So how could you say, be there and be, as if you're not in front of people, and and you're just breathing. Your only thing is you're breathing. Say, take these notes and add some ornaments to it. So that's what's happened. There's been a repertoire grown up around just simple long tones that are ornamented. So when we talk about these Zen pieces, they're called hankyoku. This is music written for the flute. It can't be played on other instruments. It has different rules. It's not considered music. It's not considered performance. So it's interesting that there's two parts of this tradition. If I play the Zen music, if my teacher's going to teach me the Zen music, he's going to teach me the classical tradition as well. They won't teach one without the other. Traditionally, in Japan, they'll teach you the classical tradition first. And when you've played for years, then they'll take out these slow pieces. But think about intricate performance. Think about virtuosic compositions and instruments. When you really accomplish something, you can actually lose some of the freshness in your music. You can lose some of the innocence. You can lose some of the excitement, some of the challenge, some of the stage fright. You can lose that, and it becomes rote. And so we say, oh, their first album was the best album. Well, why is the first album always the best album? But think about it. Something's getting in the way, right? So you be kind of like you're seducing yourself with this. I really mastered this thing. I worked for 20 years, or what's my 30 years. I really mastered it, and then you lost it. It just slipped through your hands. But the instrument is challenging enough that your ego doesn't get carried away. So the ego is a bad thing. In fact, not a bad thing, but it's an illusion. It does not exist. In Buddhism, the idea of having an ego. Now, for a musician, having an ego could be the end of it for your, real genuine playing. But they're thinking of actually your human identity as a separate person, separate, attached from this world.
Yeah.
That's all considered an illusion. So you can start to see, I'm kind of making these points from different directions, that this is a spiritually based instrument and tradition, but I believe it dovetails very nicely with the experience of a musician, always trying to remember that excitement of when, the band first got together, or when you first got a shakuhachi in your hands and you made a sound and you reached and reached and you could finally have that sound come out. And then the wonder and excitement of that. And to hold on, I always try to, in my experience here, I've always tried to hold on to that feeling of reaching for it, and it's something fresh. Because if an instrument is a well-made instrument and you have high skills, then you can evoke things from that instrument that other people can't, because they haven't gotten that far.
Sure.
And because their instrument isn't nuanced enough to be sensitive to that, this kind of high end of musicianship. So, how players will just love to have a special instrument made by some, and then if you
Sure.
get it, it's so amazing. But if you were a beginner, you could have that special instrument, but you wouldn't really be able to do anything different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I know this is obvious, but it's just a little funny that it's something this simple,
One of the things that we were talking a lot about the monks and this idea of blowing Zen. I think if people, go and Google shakuhachis, they're probably going to see a drawing of a monk with what looks like a basket on their head. Can you sort of explain that? Because I think some people might not know what that's about.
Yeah, I actually have one in the closet. You want to see it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'd love to.
Okay, we're going to shift gears here.
Yeah.
I am not a musician.
Okay.
I am a priest of nothingness. Okay. I'm a komso priest, right? So I have no identity as a human being. I'm part of something larger. In this case, it's the order of monks who play the shakuhachi as part of their spiritual development. And so here's my basket, and it's got a window. You can see out of it. And I'm going to play a C flute. This was a very popular size for these. This is a bansuri from India is a C.
Okay.
The Burm flute in the Western Orchestra, silver flute, is also a C. And I have one. This one has 5 holes. And by the way, I have one in the closet, which I won't take out because I'm sure you can imagine. It has no holes in it. It has no holes. It only plays one note. So here, I'll just play a couple notes.
Okay.
So now what you would do is I handed you a bag and you put rice in the bag. And then I would play a song to thank you for the donation to the temple and be on my way.
Now, why cover the face?
The ego.
It's for the ego. Okay.
For the ego. But okay, so this is Japan. There's another thing. In New York City, I live in New York, it's illegal to walk around with a mask on.
Okay.
You can be a criminal, this and that.
Sure. It's funny because of all my years of being in New York, thinking of how many people I've seen in masks.
Yeah, so this works well with crime. You might
Good.
not be a real tomuso. You might be a wanderer who's infiltrating. Okay.
Okay.
See, there were problems unifying Japan under a central government where you had all the clans. You had shoguns. You had just ronin. You had these wandering ex warriors
Yeah.
whose master was killed, and this clan is kaput, and so they are looking. Now these guys are trained samurai swordsmen, and they're lethal,
Mm-hmm.
and they have like they're disembodied in society. They were an elite clan. The warrior class, the samurai class, was an elite clan, and now they're carrying these flutes in their belt with this hat on. And so the government wanted to get an inside view of what's going on in the monasteries. The players were required to be licensed. So actually, I have my license behind me here on the wall, but it's not so that I could work for the government. But they were also required to report back to the government of what's going on behind the scenes.
Interesting.
So, and it's not that easy to disguise yourself as a basket-hatted priest, because you really have to know how to play the shakuhachi well.
That's true.
Right? To blend in with them. So there are stories of trying to uncover a fraud or a spy. And the way you do it is, what's your accent? What's your musical accent? So as you probably know, I used to have a really extensive record collection, and the orchestras in the 30s and 40s sound differently. The French, the Italians, the Americans, the English, they had the Germans, they had a different sound. You could almost tell the national identity of the orchestra. It was more local. It was a local musical accent. And this is Western symphonic tradition. Think of this as each temple has a song that they play only the 2 or 3 songs. Every temple plays a few songs, and they probably memorize it, but they play it with a certain kind of accent and a certain kind of ornament. And so if somebody says, "I'm from there," and then they play it, they don't have that accent. Obviously, they're not, you can unmask them. Yeah. So that's very interesting. Not really used as a weapon, but it could be used as a weapon. I mean, it is a club.
Yeah, sure.
But there's something different about this club. Is I like this. This is a element of pacifism to me. If I put my hand on this and I go like this and I pound it, it comes apart in 2 pieces.
Look at that.
And here's a joint with no cork in it. It's a precise fit.
Wow.
So if you swing it at somebody, it's going to fly in half.
Yeah.
So to me, and there are lots of stories. It's a pacifist tradition. Buddhism is a pacifist tradition. There are a lot of stories where there's a battle, there's a confrontation, and people are going to die, and we need negotiations. Enter the shakuhachi player, who plays this ephemeral music, and you hear this in the background. And it's known to disarm people, to take the violence down a notch, and take the anxiety down a notch, and it's known to de-stress person on a very deep level. It works for me. Yeah. I mean, I had a very fast-paced career, and playing the shakuhachi at night every night after work was great. It was great. And it's a coping tool, but it's also, if you can play the right way, you can empty yourself into your own sound. And if you get that level, that experience, I mean, then other people will hear that too. And they will start breathing slower and deeper, and then their mind will wander and bounce around, and then their mind will settle down as well. And this was a tool to achieve enlightenment. But what does that really mean? Somebody is very stressed out. So if they listen to their favorite album, that's going to de-stress them. On the other hand, there's a way to de-stress somebody by giving them a simple long tone to kind of go into their mind and just to relax them.
Mm-hmm.
So long before I played the instrument, I used to be outside in nature. I hear somebody playing the flute and toodaloo, toodaloo. And at first it's nice, and then it's irritating. But what do they, I don't want to hear this nonsense. I want to hear like, the wind. But if somebody was playing soft and beautiful tones, that's a very different thing. It's a very different thing. And that actually has a deep impact on the mind, and the mind and the body are connected. So mine are, but also theirs is, so their ears and they're hearing this, and their brain waves are being altered. And this, I believe, facilitates changes in the body, or healing, actual healing in the body. I mean, there's emotional part of it, but there's emotional healing, and then there's the physical body healing. So this was traditionally a healing tool. There are different states of being for humans. Well, there's most obviously there's sleeping and there's waking, and then there's like REM sleep, right? But there's also dying. That's another state of human world. And there's also being born. So these are major changes. So let's say we play a lullaby for a baby, that baby goes to sleep. It's going into another state.
Yeah.
So now the monks are playing these monks are they are in their own meditation world playing these very simple pieces year after year, and it's helping them achieve a calm mind, a clear mind, and reducing the chatter of the mind. The shakuhachi pieces are written for the purpose of aiding the movement into a higher state of consciousness. It's a different state of consciousness. So when I play a piece that's written for that purpose, I can, see, and let's say the piece is 100 years old, or some pieces are 400 years old, and it's written for that purpose. You can actually see the effect it has on people. This is music designed to heighten your senses, calm the mind, but heighten the senses. This is not a religion, but more of a sonic chemical, experience that's very different. So there's no conflict with a religious tradition. I mean, there are like wonderful things about, Hinduism, Buddhism, and all the religions that you can learn. But this is the only musical or pitch repertoire of Buddhism. There is chanting, but it's monosyllabic, right? Just regular, and there are bells, there are all kinds of effects and percussions. But in terms of melodies, there are no hymns, no, themes, but there is this. And I find that interesting so that's why when you hear these pieces, if you look for a melody, you won't find it. If you really listen to a Zen piece, you won't find the melody. You'll find a phrase, and the phrase comes back again and it comes back again, but it doesn't lead like from A to B. The oldest pieces are really just an experience. You're just floating down the river, until you get to the end. And that's why they're the most favorite of all shakuhachi players. And the newer pieces actually have a introduction section, and then a development section, and then maybe a climax, and then the unwinding at the end, and then maybe a couple closing notes. So there is a structure to this Hankyoku music. And I write some pieces myself, and I pay attention to these structures when I write, because that's a kind of composition, although you won't see it as composition like we do in the West, as certain forms of composition. I found this so fascinating that I stayed with it and decided not to just learn how to play it and then use it for my own music. I found the tradition was enough to keep me going, because as my skills increased over the years, I found I was able to play phrases that I couldn't play before, and maybe not pay attention to playing so much anymore, because I can play this piece 1,000 times, and then my mind can be turned off, and I can have this experience on a higher level. But let's just say you were beginning, you've only played for like, a couple of months, then you can play the long tones of a simpler piece and get there too. So it's never gotten like I've outgrown it. And yeah, okay, I got it. Now I'm gonna take up another
Yeah.
instrument. I thought I would, but it just never happened.
I want to thank my patrons on Patreon who helped support the creation of this video. Thanks to everyone there, I'm able to dedicate the time and resources needed to produce these in-depth interviews. So if you're enjoying this video, please consider joining me on Patreon. You'll be able to access additional content from all my interviews, there's giveaways, and there's other exclusive perks there as well. All right, now back to our conversation. Thank you. It's really interesting the way you're describing it. And I'm keep in my head as I'm listening to you, I keep coming back to this sort of conflict with ego, in a sense of a student who's trying to learn even to play a note on this flute, or let alone a piece, or to make a pleasing tone. There's so much as a student, it's a student's journey that is like struggling to get somewhere,
Mhm.
and to feel like you are able to actually have some level of accomplishment to play this flute, and how that conflicts with, you know, being in your head and going like, I'm not good at this. This is so hard. I'm out of breath. I'm struggling. All these things that are essentially driven by an egotistical goal to be good, right?
Yes, yes.
How does that sort of align with this secondary idea of playing this even just a single long tone or a piece, and being able to fully not clear your mind but have a focused, cleared mind? Is it still that same student's journey, but now you've built up the skill and repertoire to not have to struggle against the flute? Or even at your stage, are you still sometimes fighting the
Well,
flute?
I see it as self-acceptance.
Mm.
I see that where I am now, um, I try to accept who I am and how I play. So, and I try to accept the flaws and I accept my abilities as they are. So I'm not fighting against myself to master this and prove something to myself.
Or to compete with
I'm
others?
accepting of this is how I am. And, and sometimes this actually, I'll tell you something that helps me. There are players, and I hope people after watching this, they go online and they try to listen to different
Yeah.
players. There are some that play in a dazzling manner. And it just, wow, it just blows me away. And there are players 20 years younger than me that play in an amazing, dazzling, virtuosic way. And I feel like I could never do that. But on the other hand, I listen to my teacher playing, and I feel it in my heart. I feel I'm
Yeah.
struck on a deep level by it. So, that well, I wasn't dazzled, but something else happened. So then I listened to his teacher, which is Yodo Korahashi's father. That's the relationship here, right? Both Yodo and Ronnie studied with the same man, or what? One is the actual physical father.
Yeah.
And here his playing, and it's less polished, and it's less effort to play this piece well, and play this piece the way it should be, should be played. And then I have recordings of there's a great master named Jin Nyodo, and Jinnyodo, Jin Nyodo. And he was a great player of the 19th century, and he salvaged this from oblivion, this tradition. He went temple to temple, wrote everything down, tried, and he wrote even his own versions of things. But there are recordings of his, and you can listen to his. When I hear his, I feel that same deep spirit, the very powerful spirit, something that's been passed down a long time. He's playing the way with the approach that his teacher had, and his teacher and his teacher had.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really holding on to that. And we're not studying with the 5 best people we can afford and then being the greatest player we can be, but it's carrying this kind of, what was the spirit of my teacher's playing, and so on. So then when I hear our line of playing, or somebody from our line, I don't hear the dazzling effects, and we're not even trying. It's a different thing. And then I say to myself, oh, that's right. I'm not pointed in that direction by
Yeah.
my teacher to play like that. This tree of teachers and students is going down through the years, and we're trying to stay within our line just because we feel that that's the important thing to do,
Hmm.
is to capture the essence of your teacher's playing if you can. And so it's less about, you know, giving somebody wings and then they fly away into the musical adventure.
Yeah.
But it's more like you're almost going within yourself. So let's say you become a carbon copy of your teacher. Right? I'll look at it that way. Well, what about your personality? So your personality cannot be repressed, but it will come out naturally. So on the top of my mind, I'm aiming for the way my teacher played, and and I can hear recordings of the next two generations back. And in my mind, and I use the older ones as almost a corrective to see, am I closer, you know?
Yeah.
But along the way, I just am playing who I am, but I'm not paying attention to who I am. I'm being who I am. So this idea of ego, I don't think it's that we don't exist and you're an illusion. You have a name, and you have the way you present yourself to the world every day, right? And that's like wrapped in me too. That's wrapped up in who we think we are. And we would never wear somebody else's clothes, and we have a whole thing here, but that's not it. There's something on a deep level that's coming out through your music. And I find that really fascinating. Now, in the modern terms, this is very subtle stuff. So outside of the Shakuhachi tradition, there's not a lot of people that are going to appreciate it. But like that's what this whole event here
Yeah.
is today, It's like, well, what's going on here? What's so special about the
Yeah.
shakuhachi? But it's a whole world of, like for a while I was listening to a lot of organ music, and there's a lot of wonderful organ music going back, recorded early 20th century till now. And you have a lot of concerts here in New York you can go to. That's a whole world in itself.
Totally.
And and when you get outside that world, it's like, well, when people just hear it and they're just hearing, the same old piece or a horror movie, and that's already. But
Yeah.
when you enter that world, there's a whole world, and shakuhachi is very much like that. It's a solo instrument, but it
Yeah.
has a whole world within itself.
When you're listening to someone perform shakuhachi, whether it's live or in a recording, and I ask this to sort of maybe help to inform a viewer here. What are you listening for to say this is a really beautiful performance, or is it just a connection and it's not about going his or her tone is great, or look at how in pitch these notes are? Is there a sort of a standard sort
Yeah.
of guidelines there?
Well, there are untrained people who play like many years, but they're untrained. But they may have quirks they have that nobody's corrected them.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for example, we don't do tonguing. We don't do that at all. We use our fingers to duplicate the notes. But another thing that happens with people who aren't trained is sometimes, well, if you hear a child play a whistle, as the volume decreases, the pitch will drop at the very end. And that's just acoustically what happens in physics. So when I blow over these flutes, um, especially as a beginner, as you're trailing the note out, the pitch goes down, and that's ugly. It's sagging. Every note is sagging. So you learn to sort of just play it at the right angle so that that doesn't happen. And I don't even know where the magic is on that. If you're bringing your lips closer to the edge at the very end, or maybe you're like blowing the airstream up a little differently to keep it from. So, but unless somebody tells you, oh, your pitches are sagging, well, let's just say that the instrument doesn't give up its intonation. Like you just cover the holes, but the pitches could be off.
Mm-hmm.
So you can correct by blowing a slightly different for each of the holes, and you work on your pitch precision, and you work on your intonation, so that if you played with other players, you would blend. Because if we're playing, I know it's a solo instrument, but players will get together in unison, play a slow Zen piece, and that's been gone on all along.
Sure.
So, but let's just say it was a chamber piece. or let's just say it was a folk piece or a children's piece, and their pitches, they're not trained to like pay attention to pitches, then it's not going to sound nice.
Mm.
So I where I come in on this is if somebody was interested uh, and they get started with a bunch of lessons and just get introduced to the whole instrument, and then just this is what it's all about, and don't do this, this is why it's beautiful, this is why we don't with the tongue, it
Mm-hmm.
interrupts the sound, this is all about natural breathing. If you could capture that whole thing, and then they go off and they write their music, or they score it in Western notation, and they play with modern instruments as well. So I'm all open to that. So it's not even a matter of having like a lot of so-called talent, but it's because it's like 90% work and 10% or 1% talent in this instrument. In this instrument, and what's the point of rating somebody? Let's say I have a friend here. He's better than me, but he's played 10 years longer. But
Yeah.
like, well, what does better and worse mean? And getting back to the Tao, when somebody's better, somebody's worse. Somebody wins, that makes everybody else losers. That's not the right way to look at it. I just look at it as a kind of a flow. Oh, well, maybe in 10 years I'll be as good as them. That's if my ego needs to be justified. But we do have egos. We want to be good.
Yeah.
So it's not really good to judge somebody. If I hear a beginner play, I think it's really nice because they're reaching for a tone and I can hear the tone that they're reaching for, and especially if I'm their teacher, then I can kind of help them reach
Yeah.
that tone. And so that's really nice. What I try to do in my career is give you a concert accidentally. Like you didn't think you were going to a musical concert, but you went to one. See, like say I play in a Japanese garden on Long Island. I've been doing that my whole career. But people going to the garden, and then there's a flute player there. And then if they become changed or something happens good for them by hearing the flute, I've done what a shakuhachi player is supposed to do and wants to
Mm-hmm.
do. But now when you buy tickets and you go to the nice hall and you hear the dazzling players and you're judging them and you're saying, oh yeah, now he plays like this, I play like that, and it's a whole other thing. It's musical world, it's entertainment, it's another thing. And so I worked for a living, so I didn't do music career for a living. I had a main job, okay, but I've also always on the side maintained this and then built this up. And now at this point, it's probably the biggest part of my life right now. But still, I'm not interested in all those seats. I mean, it really is a great for your ego to have hundreds of people in chairs in rows, hanging on every little note. But that's not what I'm going for. Sometimes that happens, Yeah, I've been there. That happens, but it's not. When you talk about the ego, like I'm interested in the actual experience of playing over and playing for people, and what is it doing for the people. I mean, you always go to a show, it's a very expensive show and it's fabulous and all that, but there's also the people that never go to those shows or can't afford those shows or don't have a teacher, and they can't afford a $3,000 shakuhachi, so I have my YouTube channel, which is free, which gives you this
Yeah.
stuff for free. So I had to sort of let go of my ego a bit to go on camera and say to myself, well, any flaws, I'm out there. Like you're very exposed. Like when you're online, you're
Yeah.
very exposed, and you have all the trolls and all that stuff. But on the other hand, there are people. This will be their only introduction to the shakuhachi. This will be the only thing that they can get right now. But it could lead somewhere else. You
Totally.
see. So it's totally driven, but it's not something that can be self-taught. But on the other hand, I think we plant seeds for journeys that people make. They start in a certain way. Like many players, even in recent years, they start with learning the shakuhachi, and 5 years later they move to Japan.
Yeah.
And they're studying with great masters over there. So you don't know even where those journeys are going to go.
You're now, I would say, very accomplished. You have your certificates. You are licensed to teach. You've been granted a name. But through that journey, were there periods of time where you suffered with imposter syndrome or felt, what is this path I'm on? Like, am I going to be, is this something that I'll be accepted doing? Or did you tell your parents you're getting real into this and they freaked out? Like what's that? A little bit about your journey in that sense.
Oh, yeah. I was married and she did not like it. I was married back then when I started. Um, she didn't like it. And but that's tough when you're
Yeah.
living with somebody and take up an instrument and they've got to listen to you at the rough first years. And that was, but this is something for me. And then my father um was in the Air Force during the Korean War. He was a boy going to the newsreels from World War II and watching the Japs
Yeah.
kill us. So he didn't want to know about it also being very conservative politically and very fundamentalist Christian. So he didn't want to know about Buddhism. He wanted to know about my son playing the flute. And so that
Yeah.
was like, okay, I got it, okay, fine. Um, and there are Asian people who see you play poorly and they just roll their eyes. And but maybe you play poorly because you haven't been playing, that long.
Sure.
And I really didn't get into it for a music career. I got into it for the personal experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did have naysayers, but other people I know didn't really had encouraging environments. But I kind of learned to um, not let that hurt me. It's almost like, well, getting back to Taoism, I just love that. It's called the Tao Te Ching, right? It's my favorite book on this subject. If somebody hurts you, and then, well, what have they hurt? What's the you that they've hurt? It's some idea of yourself that's been damaged, but is it really you? It's not even you what they've hurt. They've hurt some conception, some self-conception of yourself. It's not who I am as a person
Yeah.
that they're hurting. So it's a very interesting. So if I paid less attention to, how I look, how I sound, what am I doing, how I explain it, I paid less attention to that. People can say what they want to say. They can do what they want to do. And I feel like free from it. I always feel like I should not be answerable for me with this tradition. In fact, I don't follow the tradition because I feel like I should. It's so I want to. And also I'm not goal oriented. So there's a lot of music here. I have like piles and piles of music, and I play the repertoire, the main repertoire I play. And I can play most of it on a professional level. The ones I can't, I have to warm up for a couple of weeks, and then I could go
Sure.
on stage. But that's only to me to keep my competence up, keep my level of playing up, because I've polished this thing here, and I want to keep it on a nice high shine. I don't want to let
Yeah.
it slip away. So that's the end of it. And then now people hearing me now could be impressed, but they wouldn't be impressed 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But also there's something else going on, which is I said I wasn't goal oriented, and I'm not. That I'm going to like now everybody will universally accept me as the Grandmaster of whatever. There's only like 2 Grandmasters in the U.S. and 2 or 3 of us, right? But
Yeah.
that's like no. And then now what about the responsibility in that? Or then what is this, a bunch of BS? What let all that go. But I want to keep these pieces as much as possible the way my teacher played them. There's both the Zen pieces, and then play all the classical or all the trio pieces at a professional level. So I feel like that's what I want to do with my time, and that's a lot of meaning for me. But people might be impressed, or they may not be impressed. Now, where I am personally this year, and so if you consider I started in '88, so it's a long time ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
This year, I felt my playing got a lot better. I've been really working on it, working on my playing, and I could feel that I can play pieces so much better than I could just a year ago. So one of the things I do is I just take one of these and I'll go into one of the subways that it's the quietest, that has the most echoes, and I'll play for hours just just the tones. We call them the long tones, just big, long breaths. And I'll spend hours and hours and hours just focusing on a beautiful tone.
Yeah.
And then maybe the next day when I practice, I'll take out all my scores and the music stand and all this other stuff, and then I'll work on it. Or maybe I'll play with recordings and all that stuff. But I will find when I came back the second day that I'm really got this ringing tone at the beginning, even though now I'm working very quickly and my brain is going quickly.
Yeah.
It's always worthwhile to me to aim, as high as I can, and then you start to feel like the kickback of, oh yeah, now I can do this. Now I can do this. So it's always, and it's not like a carrot and a stick. It's almost like, you want, like once I painted a sunset and then I paddled into it. It's kind of like that. You got this sunset and then you could paddle into it. So I guess starting with that, people didn't accept this at the beginning. It just sort of made it a something. Well, whatever, that's fine. I mean, obviously, all aspects of our lives, we can't be, we can't fence ourselves in by other people's expectations of us. But mostly, to me, it was a matter of being fenced in by your own perceived limitations. So let's see, if something very daunting comes up, it's beyond, if you feel that it's beyond your limitations, then you have made it beyond your limitations. But if it comes to you and then you say, I can see, where the greatness of this piece is. Some composer in 1730 wrote this piece, or, and whenever it was, and then you go and you can get a touch of that greatness and you can enjoy that process. And the higher level you can achieve, then the more you can enjoy, like just touch like the greatness of Mozart or somebody else. But I don't play that repertoire. Yeah. But whatever it happens to be, there's something in it. So why would I care that my next door neighbor doesn't like it? It's this is something at a much higher level.
Yeah.
You see? And then once in a while, then sometimes you're with your own, bros, and they all get it, so yeah. That's kind of fun, And then when we do have these festivals, these world festivals, they occur in different countries, every couple of years. And then suddenly you have a room full of like 400 shakuhachi players. And that's quite an experience,
Yeah.
Or a room full of people that speak different languages. In this case, we had Chinese, Korean, Spanish, me, English, and nothing else. And very few people could speak another language. But when we took out the scores, so here's our music scores, like so-and-so performed something and like, oh yeah, I love the way they played this part and all of this. But we're not speaking English. We're musicians that speak this written language. We spend this written language. So we were savoring the way somebody really got a handle on this piece.
Yeah.
And so we were just enjoying that. But this is with people who, and by the way, some of them are the monks. Some of them are the monks. The monks, I've had dinner with the monks, and because not speaking English makes small talk kind of tough, right? But you get to know, you have dinner with someone, you get to know what kind of people they are. Yeah. So, and I just think that's always a really good corrective, because they're not good players. They're not trying to be good players. And so there'll be, say there's 400 people at a festival, and there'll be maybe a group of 20 monks. And they have orders, and they have the whole thing. It's all going there. And special outfits they wear, and then special pieces they play. They do processions while they play. And it's all out there. And they've memorized this, several pieces that they know. They memorize them, and they play them. And these are ordinary people in a religious order. And they play the shakuhachi. And they come to, say, a festival, and And they're just amazed that people like me or my colleagues here in New York or people in South America who play, and there's a lot of people in Germany and Belgium to play. It's they're like, wow, this is so cool. You guys can really play the shakuhachi. We can't really play the shakuhachi, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
There's that humility and and that kind of blue collar feel. It's just really great.
I'm going to transition
Okay.
to something that's sort of a new fun segment I'm trying to do in all these interviews. And this is
Oh,
sort of
okay.
our little last little bit before we kind of sort of wrap. So I'm calling
Okay.
this Jeff Starr's 5-star questionnaire, and I'll begin. Are you ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Cats or dogs?
Cats,
Meat or vegetables?
vegetables,
Soup or sandwich?
sandwich,
Drink or drive?
drink,
Late night or early morning?
late night.
Beautiful. Okay. I feel like we know everything now.
Well, some of those were tough. I love my
Yeah.
meat and I love my vegetables.
Well, I think we've covered a lot today, and I really appreciate you having given me so much time to discuss. And I learned
Yeah,
a lot. This
it's
was
been
really
fun.
fantastic.
I knew when I saw your work before that you love just sinking your teeth into it and getting into the
Yeah.
details and the nuances.
Well, this is great, and so thank you once again. And please take a moment
Oh,
to tell everyone how best they can find you. I know I will put a link to your YouTube channel, but best ways to follow you, or if they want to take lessons, what's the best way to contact you? I
oh,
hand it
okay.
to you.
Best way to contact me, maybe direct message me on Instagram,
Okay.
Daniel underscore Soergel, Soergel. And then you'll see like other aspects of my life,
Yeah.
just funny things going on. Um, and then my name, if you Googled me, Nyohaku, that's like all over the place.
Okay.
So that, and in fact, yeah, I know I have a YouTube channel, but if you Google Shakuhachi lessons, you'll see a picture of me like in this room, but I've double exposed. So there's two of me. I'm giving myself a lesson,
Love it. Love it.
and it's free, and it's actually a real lesson,
All right.
a real 15-minute lesson. So it's like, oh, okay, this is so that means a lot to me. And you can always comment, but I will add something here that so for since like 1995, I've been playing shakuhachi for free in the John Hume's Japanese Garden on Long Island. So if you Google Japanese Garden Long Island, you'll come across a website that's called the North Shore Land Alliance, and it's a nature conservancy. So they protect the land of Nassau County, which is mansions,
Yeah.
behind long driveways, right? And Ferraris and Maseratis driving around. But okay. But there's also plenty of land when these mansions come into the, public domain.
Yeah.
So this garden conservancy protects the land, and they recently added the estate of John Humes, and John Humes had a authentic Japanese garden built there in 1960. So now once a month, on the second Saturday of every month, I go out there and play. So you can go and walk through a stroll garden built in the woods for free. This is near Oyster Bay, Long Island.
Beautiful.
You can walk, and then if you go happen to be on the second Saturday, you'll hear this flute playing, and that's where you can hear shakuhachi in a tea house with tatami mats, sliding
Excellent.
screens, and it's just really really wonderful. And outside of that, live concerts are sporadic in New York. So it's when we can get people here, and then we do them.
Yeah.
So I can't announce any particular regular concert series except for that.
Well,
Um,
that's a great starting point,
yeah,
and like I've said, I think a couple times now, I really encourage everyone to check out your YouTube channel because there are tons of great videos about shakuhachi, resources just about its sort of history and learning, but really explain all sorts of aspects. And of course, you can listen to the beautiful instrument as well. So
Yeah, one thing like we touched on is here is I was telling you about the different flutes, like, this one's got the roots at the bottom,
Yeah.
right where the tree grows out, and this one it's been shaved off, But I have sites where I say sell flutes on eBay, right? So no, you'll also get my eBay site.
Yeah.
But I talk about like the beauties. What are the beauties of a shakuhachi? What makes it so valuable?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not just a commercial to sell an object, but now that it's been sold 3 years ago, it's
Hmm.
just you can really learn about the nuances of it. It's kind of fun, I wish there was
Right.
something like that about guitars or pianos that I could watch, for
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, but
that's
it's
cool,
all
man.
fun stuff. We can talk for hours and hours on this.
Yeah. Well, this is great. Thank you so
Well, thank you,
much.
Jeff. Thanks for
All
having me
right.
over
All
on
right.
this on your page.
I'm gonna wave bye bye for now.
I love it.
Thank you.